Next up, we have Emma. Emma from Digitalax. How's it going, Emma? How you doing?
Good, going well.
Are you in New York for NYC NFT?
Yeah, I'm actually based out of here, so I don't have to travel too far, just walk a few streets. But I will be here next week. Digitalax is co-hosting and producing a few events, which is really cool.
Awesome. So happy to hear. Well, I'm definitely excited to hear what you've been working on, and thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours. You've got 30 minutes. If you need any help, I'll be here.
Sure. Is there like questions or the ability for the audience to ask questions or that?
Yeah, if the
Before
audience has questions, I'll definitely come in and ask them for you. Otherwise, we can have a discussion when it comes time for questions, and I'll make sure to uh, bring forth some interesting questions for us to talk about.
Okay, cool. I'll leave some time at the end.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Okay, so I don't have slides, but I'll share my screen in a bit to go through more of what Digitalex has been working on over kind of the past few months slash a year. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Emma Jane, and I founded Digitalax, which is a Web3 fashion protocol. We're entirely CCO. Everything that we do, code develop, produces in the public domain. And we started that mid 2020. So it's certainly been quite a roller coaster of a year. Even just the past few days was is kind of its own narrative in itself. And myself, I've been in the space for many years before that, both from engineering and a finance side of things. So I'll dive more into what Digitalex has kind of been doing and what we do in a moment. But I guess more interestingly, to kind of look more at the global economy that all of us are experiencing right now. For some of you, it might be your first time experiencing the true volatility of crypto that we've seen in kind of the past few days when we look at our wallets and everything's 90% down or more. And then also when we look at the traditional economy and the supply chain crunches, the exceeding demand, inflation at all-time highs, the Fed on fire. I know I saw a Twitter post just the other day, and it was someone standing outside of the Fed doing like an oil painting and showing flames literally coming out of it. So yeah, it's pretty crazy times to be living in. And for a lot of us, it really drives home more of the point of why Web3 is so important, why Web3 tooling is so critical. How do we actually improve and enhance globally connected, decentralized coordination, which is really what the blockchain is all about. So going on from that and looking more into when we kind of look at that narrative and everything that's been going on, whether we're talking about exceeding prices of oil, energy, gas, renewables. A lot of what we're talking about is really at its heart the kind of trade of textiles and the price of textiles, clothing prices, how that impacts our everyday, and not just really what the price of clothing is, but what the fashion that we wear does for us, which is very much what Digitalex is all about. It's about producing tooling to make fashion that does more for us, that is Web3 and Metaverse enabled, which then feeds into kind of the entire global economy itself and looking at, well, how do we actually produce better things at higher quality, lower prices? And how can we use what we make to better accomplish the things for us. So that leads me more into kind of this direct part of fashion and what is actually fashion in Web3. What does fashion do for us? How can we use it for really accomplishing more things to make it in the market, particularly when everything is very volatile as it is. So it's really moving from this concept of Web3 equaling money or open money, which is a lot of what a lot of us associate with it, to, well, how does Web3 actually equal more of the open production of stuff in a globally connected way? How do we move from making money bags, which is kind of a lot of the memes on Twitter, to how do we actually make fabric bags digital and physical, which is very much what Digitalax is at the heart of, is how do you actually equip people with more localized tooling where they can be self-reliant and produce fashion, whether that's the digital kind of streetwear that goes into gaming environments, to actually being able to walk IRL and use that fashion to get into clubs as an access pass when you're going to an exclusive event in New York City, and when you're wearing Balenciaga a dress to Prada shoes, what is that signal to the doorman over kind of rocking up in sandals or old jeans? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but fashion really being used as this access pass to also it very much being something that protects us from the elements. When we go outside and it's hot or it's cold, how we adapt to that. To also it being a medium where we can carry things. We can use pockets, we can use handbags, we can use backpacks. So it's not just about, well, what does the fashion that we wear about its style, but what does it actually do for us? But very much about, well, how do we produce it? How do we engage in more efficient, sustainable, coordinated supply chain practices, which is really then going more into, well, how does Web3 tooling enable all of this, which is, again, very much of what Digitalax is at the heart of. So I'll share my screen to kind of take you through a bit more of that. So this is Digitalax and our homepage. We produce a lot of different items in-house, from digital fashion that you can kind of see here, digital accessories and items, to IRL streetwear, which, let me get some of this here. Oh, sorry, it's going through a little bit quickly. But I'll see if I can share another tab down here. Sorry, 1 second. Here we go. To IRL streetwear that you can purchase as NFTs, and then get the physical item shipped to you, and then also have the digital version NFT that you can stake within our protocol, and also kind of have this whole concept of where to earn, which is, again, all about, well, with the fashion that you're earning, what does it, or that you're wearing, what does it actually do for you beyond style? How can you put it to work for you in different dimensions to even earn you bags as you're walking down the street? And that's a really big concept that we've been focused on for the past year or so, is how do we transform the entire supply chain process so it's becoming more localized, so that anyone can engage with it, which is really very much what the metaverse is about. When you break down beyond the metaverse kind of being 3D objects, or us considering it, okay, we put this kind of screen on our face and we see 2D cartoons running everywhere, and someone can dress up as a banana or as a fairy or whatever. But the metaverse is really about location independence. It's about hyper-visualization, location independence, and self-sovereignty. How we are able to use the world around us, engage in world building, engage in the world economy, which is in very many ways the most interesting game, to make stuff that is put to work for us, that we can really own in a very flexible way at every stage of the process, from how we order the stuff, to try it on, to purchase it, to how it's prototyped in a digital environment, to then made physically, to how it's cut, to how it's sewn, and everything in between. So really looking at the comprehensive supply chain process around all of it. So what does that metaverse or modern metaverse enabled factory really look like? And how does that change the traditional fashion economy as we see it today? Because when a lot of us think of traditional fashion, we think of it being unsustainable, but we don't just think of it being unsustainable from a more environmental perspective, but also very much from the entire industry and economy itself, where it's concentrated amongst these big brands that have total market share, Their incentive is very much just how do they decrease or really put to zero their production costs and put all of kind of the burden on the end consumer, and how do they increase slave labor to actually do this. So really unsustainable practices across the board, which makes it really difficult if you're an indie designer or if you're someone that wants to stick to more principles and practices within the industry, to be able to come in and really engage in a way where you can make money, you can maintain self-sovereignty, you can locally produce and create items, rather than having to kind of go into this whole system of shipping things off to a factory in China where you might totally disagree with the way that those items are being produced, but feel like that's the only way to actually get something into the market, and at the same time have enough capital to keep a roof over your head, and stay in the industry that you love without selling out, quote unquote, to go and work for the Nikes or the Balenciagas or Pradas or Louis Vuittons of the world, instead of staying independent. And that's really what Digitalax is all about. And our core mission is using Web3 tooling and the metaverse enabled world to change radically the way that the entire supply chain, production, and process operates, in how we actually engage in what we make. And then also, not just what we make, but what that fashion does for us beyond style, which is many of the points that I mentioned, from it being hyper useful in allowing us to just carry stuff around when we go outside, to it protecting us from the elements, to it giving us access passes, to it allowing us to have fun in how we express ourselves, who we are, the freedom, for us being able to really show that to the world. So a good kind of analogy, I would say, through all of this and looking at, well, using Web3 tooling to localize this, or making kind of engaging in smaller production and factory models, and really localizing what we do so we don't have to rely on the Disneys, the Nikes, the corporations, the mass Shenzhen supply chains to be able to produce what we want and put that in the market. A really good analogy is looking at what's happened over the past 2 decades with co-working and maker spaces, and what that is really enabled for individuals and small groups to be able to come together in more of this small studio model and produce and make things without having to rely on just the big corporates. And it's very much what we're seeing today, as inflation hits skyrocketing levels, is people in the market looking for, well, how do I level up? How do I increase my own skills so I'm less reliant on those around me? And knowing that if I'm at the whims of them, whatever decisions they make, or whatever they decide to kind of push top down, that it's really going to potentially affect, and already is, the way that we, or the items that we purchase, the materials that we can source, to the products that we can actually put out there in the market. It's kind of like the choice between being able to engage in the craft that you love as an artisan, as a maker, just for the sake of it and just because you love it and you believe in it, to feeling like you're having to do certain things because you rely on Adobe and the way that they run their corporate model. So Web3, in this permissionless nature, really gives us this tooling through NFTs, being able to own things and inflexibly own things and go directly to the market through that, skipping the middlemen, to also taking payments from people in the way that we engage with banks or the financial system and financial fabric around us, to be more self-reliant, be more independent, be more self-sovereign. So that's really, what we do at Digitalax is looking at how do we make what we make, what is that process, and how can we deliver that in different ways so it does more for us. And for the past year, we've been building the entire stack, as I mentioned, from literally digital fashion production tools, from after you create your garment or as you're producing your garment, how can you modularize that in different ways so that when it's sold off, at its kind of final end sale. It's not just the one garment, say as an NFT or one digital fashion garment, but how it incorporates all of these modularized patterns and materials and textures that went into making the garment, and knowing that usually in a supply chain there's a whole bunch of people that are engaged within that process. How can they also be involved in receiving royalties or splits as that garment is sold to the end consumer, which is one of the components of our ecosystem called fractional garment ownership, which takes all of the patterns, materials, and textures and compartmentalizes them as 1155 NFTs on chain, and then connects them to the master garment that was part of that. So when it's sold, you have kind of this transparent verification and tracking and record across the entire supply chain process, to also enabling more utility, where when you have a digital garment, how could that be worn not just in a gaming or esports environment, but also how can that be used as a prototype to actually creating the physical item as really cool streetwear apparel that people can then wear when they go out to clubs or parties, and also as an access pass as part of that. So I think a question might have come in. Oh no, sorry, I just had a buzz on my screen. So yeah, everything from physical items and merch drops. And I think I just realized that it wasn't showing the new Chrome tab that I'm on. So I'll try and change that. Now, here we go. This is some of the physical merch and items that we sell. So little hoodies and shirts to, yeah, going back to, sorry, kind of lost my train of thought. But in everything that we've created, looking at not just that supply chain process itself, and how do we really engage Web3 tooling as part of that, like this concept of open source and fractional garment ownership and on-chain record and transparency. But also looking at when people purchase NFTs in fashion, experimenting with, okay, even when they have the physical item shipped to them, what do they do with the NFT component? And for example, with these NFTs, similar to some of our other ones, not just do you shipped the physical IRL item, but you're also able to take the digital version of the NFT and stake that in our staking platform, and then earn various different ERC20 tokens, which have utility in governance, in ticketing, in access to different communities and events within our entire ecosystem as well, which is really exciting, and looking more at, well, when you make things, what do they actually do for you, and how can you kind of enhance and stretch out more of that full life cycle. So I'll probably, Penguin, that's kind of a really good overview of what we're doing and what we're focused on. If anyone has any more specific questions, I can go into more of those.
Great. Yeah, I love what you're doing, and the gamification of like how to stake the NFT and proceed and engage people after the purchase. So that way, it's not just like a one-time engagement with people. You're circling them back into the ecosystem. Can you talk a little bit more about the Mona token and how that fits into everything?
Sure. Yeah, so Mona, that's our core ERC20 token for the ecosystem. It was one of the first tokens that we released after our first NFT sale. And this is really for coordinating governance. So we have proposals that go live on Snapshot every week. Mona is what's used for anyone in the community to be able to vote and pass those proposals. It's also used as a payment mechanism. So all the NFTs on our various different marketplaces, we have about three aggregated core marketplaces within our ecosystem. It can be used to purchase the fashion items. It's also used as a distribution mechanism, so how we decentralize more of the community and those that engage with it and are a part of it. Whereas I mentioned, where you can take these fashion items and stake them, one of the tokens that you earn when you stake these items is Mona token itself. So yeah, it's really the underlining and underpinning fabric for coordinating the IRL digital human aspects of what we do on chain.
Great. I have another question about um, organizing digital fashion and kind of NFTs and interoperability of wearables. Are you guys stepping into the wearable space at all, or where do you see kind of wearables going in this next
Good
space?
question. Yeah, so we've done a ton with wearables. We've done stuff with Decentraland. We've done stuff with Among Us, with Minecraft. So that was actually a really big part when I go back last year. A few of our early auction sales were for our related to our esports platform, ESPA, which is like a casual decentralized esports platform where when you purchase different digital fashion NFTs or wearables from our marketplace, you could take them into these different gaming environments that were also interoperable in different ways of being able to like wear the item in Among Us, also receive like a physical IRL counterpart, and then also take that into places like Decentraland as well. But as you engage in these different games, you actually also earned Monotoken as a payment mechanism as part of that as well. So we've explored a lot of that space and we'll continue to explore it. But as I mentioned earlier, our really kind of core fundamental for all of this is looking at, well, although the surface layers of digital fashion are really interesting and how those relate to the metaverse, it's also about, well, how do you get the ability to create digital fashion and also physical fashion as well, and those production skills into the hands of everyone. So really looking more at, how do you keep open the entire process so it can be more interoperable. So when someone sees a really cool fashion item that they like, that someone's wearing Decentraland, if it's entirely CCO or open source and permissionless, they can take those items and then mod them and remix them and take them into Minecraft or take them into more native open source and Web3 gaming environments that we're seeing being developed at the moment.
Awesome, thank you. Ten Finney also joined us. He had a question that he wanted to ask you. Ten, are you there?
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Emma. Yeah. Big fan of everything that you're doing. I have like several parcels and voxels that we've been building out over about the last year and a half or so, and it's like a big event center, and there's a big stage there, and we've hosted some events. I am so into what you've been doing with your open source. I've like cloned a couple of your websites and tried to make them work for me. It's just like really fun. How can I just like offer my services back to you guys and just say, look, I'm going to stage Digitalax fashion shows for you. Just tell the people to show up. I'll have your assets all posted around. It'll be like a free convention center for any day that you want to use it. And then we'll host it. We'll do the back end for you. We'll have the studio. We'll do the AV on it. What's even the right process of doing that? Do I have to reach out to like a marketing crew, or do I just say, like, design it for you and just say, here it is, Emma, you can use it anytime you want? Because I want to
Right.
support what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Really good question. So look, we're entirely CCO, which means you can take anything, you can download literally any asset from our marketplace, from our websites, and a lot of that is 3D fashion, and fashion that also can be like created and kind of transformed into a voxel environment. You don't need to ask any of us. You can put the Digitalax logo on it, the Global Designer Network, which is our global Web3 fashion DAO logo on it. You don't need to reach out to anyone specifically. Of course, you can like message our Discord and say, hey, we're doing this, which we'd love to hear, and then we can announce it to our community and get more people behind it. But yeah, there's no need for a formal process or asking permission, asking if you can or can't do this. You can take any of our assets. And the really cool thing is that every item that we upload and release on our marketplace, we also attach the 3D source files or 2D source files as part of that, which is really cool, which means that when you download the item, if you take like the IPFS NFT URL, you're not just getting like the rendered version, but you're also able to take the 3D item as well, which can be, when you're modding and remixing things, that can be really helpful. And we also have what's called our meta source vaults, which are the CCO open source vaults, where we upload a lot of our content as well. And that's a GitLab URL. So we have that on our website, but I share that here as well. And that means that you have like, this entire kind of source materials behind anything. So when you do that, please like definitely message in our Discord and we can get behind it. But at the same time, you don't need to ask permission from any of us.
Okay, cool. So I just need to locate the assets, the content that I like, maybe make some conversions, look for the IPFS links that'll work within voxels and just set it up and then just kind of announce it back to you guys. And then at some point, maybe we will like invite your favorite artists in and then they can come do their live fashion show and then we'll just kind of help host it. And that sounds like fun.
Awesome.
It sounds like
Yeah.
perfectly permissionless, and we're just all using each other's assets in a neat space. Thanks, Emma. Continue with the good
Thank
work
you.
that you're doing. Thanks, Penguin, for letting me ask.
Yep, no problem. Yeah, so I had another question. Obviously, you mentioned empowering the supply chain. That's a huge advantage that we have to like recognize the people that are doing the work, and kind of not follow the same methods that the mainstream has done and kind of oppressed the actual people doing. I love the fractional garment ownership model where people can kind of get rewarded for their part of the contributions. Can you talk a little bit about how that process goes with the producers to getting them engaged with Web3? Many of them probably have never heard of what we're doing or are unaware of the possibilities. How does that process go?
Right. So you mean more in terms of like actually like factories, for example, and larger production facilities, even smaller ones, but getting behind and using Web3 tooling to say produce like a garment or output a garment. Just so I
Yes.
know right,
Yes.
exactly. So it's a really interesting question. I mean, there's many layers to it. So one of the layers, of course, is Web3 projects like, for example, Digitalax, other fashion projects that are engaging in NFTs and Web3 out there, engaging more with their suppliers and getting them to know more about, okay, well, Web3, or how could the ownership model be transformed, or even the distribution model between, you know, them saying to their supplier, just submitting an order and saying, hey, I need these materials, to actually being able to say, back some of those materials by NFTs. Which that in itself is still an early process. And it depends on who your production partners are. I know that there's a lot of really small and localized ones out there that engage in like DTG, which is direct to garment printing. And that's a lot more about it being distributed, being it decentralized and inherent kind of in the process itself. But that still is a little way away because a lot of these traditional partners, they're have different views about Web3 and NFTs. They're not so bullish on it. They don't really see how Web3 isn't just open money, but it's all about open production of stuff. So the way that Digitalax is really focused on going about it is introducing more of these concepts like fractional garment ownership, which lean into composability, they lean into open source, and they promote more indie designers to look at the supply chain differently, or look at, okay, well, how can they actually produce not just a digital fashion garment, but the actual source materials from these like more modular components as part of that. That's a really important way is leaning more into kind of like this Web3 way of setting up a supply chain, which then also looks at, okay, well, even then when you're a project like Digitalax and we don't have yet, massive factories behind us, but everything that we can do, that we can make it more on-chain or make it more Web3, like I mentioned, from not just fractional garment ownership, but looking at, okay, when we create a physical item, how do we also make the digital prototype of that? And then that digital prototype can be an NFT that can be taken into an open source gaming world or be staked to earn yield, being interoperable in different DeFi protocols even. That's really looking at more of transforming this entire production process so it's becoming more and more Web3 native over time, and not just reliant on the physical kind of manufacturing itself.
Well, thank you so much for building in public, inviting everyone to come. Can you remind people of how they can get engaged and follow along with what Digitalax? Sorry, I always say the A, Digitalax.
Don't worry, everyone, like they always ask me, how do I pronounce Digitalax? I say, don't worry, just say whatever. But the best way is really like follow us on Twitter. So we're Digitalax _. And then also join our Discord, which the link's on our site as well, digitalax.xyz. And yeah, reach out. My DMs on Discord and Twitter are open, and love talking everything open source, Web3 tooling, fashion, metaverse, gaming. So yeah, make sure to reach out if you're interested in what we're doing, and happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.